Welcome back, everyone. This is episode number 81. No, 82. 82. We're at 82 already. This is so exciting. Today on Indie Reads Aloud, Kaia Misk is here to read for us. She's a brand new author to me, so I'm having super fun getting to know her. And today I get to hear her read to me, which, as you all know, is one of my favorite things in the whole world. Welcome, Kaia. I'm so glad you could join us today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're going to have fun. Um, just to let everyone know before we begin today's episode, we do have a listener advisory on this episode for strong language, mature situations, and some violence. So if you have little ears nearby, you might want to preview this episode before you share it with them. So let's get right into today. As I said, Kaia is a brand new author to us. So I'm super excited to share you with the world. You're coming to us from Pittsburgh, right?
Yes.
How long have you been in the Pittsburgh area?
I was born in this area and I lived away for about 5 or 6 years and then I returned.
How awesome. I've never been to Pittsburgh. Someday I'll make it. Someday.
It's a good town. It's a special town. So,
That's awesome. So, since childhood, Kaia loved books. At the age of 12, she began a teenage romance novel, which she never finished, but it served as a fun topic of conversation for her preteen friends. Later, upon the birth of her first nephew, she wrote a children's poetry book as a gift for him. It still sits on the bookshelf even today. She has a strong background in legal writing, having worked as a paralegal for years, all the time wondering what comical characters can be created through attorney personalities. I know some attorneys. That's an entertaining endeavor.
oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Kaia's first novel, One Step Closer, was written on a dare from friends, and she did it as a NaNoWriMo project. And we all know what that's like, people sitting around the desk saying, hey, 50,000 words, 30 days, you can do this. And then there are people who say, no, you can't. And then, of course, your answer is, watch me, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what I said.
that I did it exactly the same way. Kaia has since written Revelation, which is a young adult Christian flash fiction piece.
But that one's not mine.
That's not yours?
No, no, not Revelation.
I don't know where I got that from.
Oh, I'm sorry.
See, Diana, not a perfect human being. Today, she's going to be reading from her book, The Firstborn Son, which is romantic suspense, correct?
Yeah.
Awesome. So, can you tell us a little bit about what prompted you to write this novel?
Yes. I am half Italian. My parents grew up across the street from each other in a very ethnic section of Pittsburgh where most of the people worked in the mills. So the Italian side of the family had a lot of people who had accents. And then
What
later in life,
fun.
yeah, I know, and it's always so interesting. And then later in life, I worked with a man who was from Italy, and he just said funny things. My favorite one was, "I'm gonna go make the cough," instead of coffee, because it's a tendency to drop that last syllable in that
Sure,
language.
yeah.
Right. So he and my real uncle Ignatius, or Ignazio in Italian, were the reason I created Uncle Nutsy in the book, which
Uncle
is one of the
Nutsy. I love
characters.
it.
Yeah.
That's a great name.
Yeah.
I grew up with a similar situation. I grew up in a heavily Jewish populated area. So you get those turns of phrase and you get those um, emphasis on different syllables when they speak and lots of talking with the hands.
Hmm. Hmm.
Super fun.
Yes.
So I'm going to read the synopsis from the back of the book, and I hope I found the right synopsis. We'll find
Sure.
out really quickly here.
Yes.
Becoming a ruthless mob boss, like his father, is the last thing Frankie Renzi wants. But when Sofia, is it Ciambetti? Ciambetti?
Ciambetti.
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 See,
Mhm.
this is me not being able to do phonetic reading.
It's all right.
When her father is gunned down, Frankie must become the very thing he loathes in order to protect the woman he loves. Sophia was devoted to Frankie until he stood her up and she questioned his fidelity. Now that she's alone and an heiress, Mafia suitors slither around her. I love that slither. That's yuck, but so good. Um, Marriage to him might be her only hope. They try to rekindle their love amidst a mob war. But can their love survive what the mafia has in store? I'm guessing this is all imagination, not really based on true mafia experience, right?
No,
Yeah.
no, this is all made up. It's all made up. There are just a few characters that are based on family
Sure.
members and people
And
I
were they
knew.
happy about that? Your family members?
I think they got a real kick out of it. A
That's even
couple of
better.
them are deceased and but
Okay.
we had a good time talking about it. At the launch party, my cousins wanted to know everything.
What fun. So I'm really excited to hear this story. I love ethnic stories that are filled with imagination, and it really sounds like you've got something here. So I'm super excited. I was that kid and still am, the 6 year old sitting in the front row on the carpet at story time at the library. Hearing people read out loud to me is one of my favorite things. So I'm really happy to have you today.
Thank you.
So I'm going to give you the microphone when you are ready. Please
Okay.
read aloud.
Okay. Everyone, this is The Firstborn Son by Kaia Misk. Chapter 1. Rain pelted Frankie Renzi's face as he chased the councilman along the riverfront. The man ran beneath a bridge that offered temporary cover, but the pool made a classic mistake that cost him precious seconds. He looked over his shoulder. Beneath the bridge, Frankie increased his pace, driving his lean body forward. After many years of construction work, his strength and stamina were unbeatable, despite the wet clothes that weighed him down. In the sideways slashing rain, he'd almost closed the distance between them. 3 steps, two, one. He grabbed the man's shirt collar and poured all his energy into jerking the guy to the ground. Frankie kept him there with a well placed shoe to the groin. Please let me go. I'll give the money back, the man said. Not my problem. Frankie didn't give a damn about a pathetic plea from a bribe taker. Not at all. His Renzi blood ran hot because this man took him away from Sofia tonight, from his future. His goal was to finish this business and get to the restaurant where she waited. He hoped he wasn't too late. Within seconds, a car pulled alongside him, a tinted window lowered. I can return the money, the councilman cried again. Take him back under the bridge, the driver said. It rubbed Frankie raw taking orders from that creep, but the tables would turn soon enough. I'll give it all back, the councilman cried again. The driver backed the car beneath the bridge into the darkness. Frankie released a heavy sigh. Bad things happened in the dark. He ought to know. At least his part in the affair was almost done. If so, he might still salvage his evening, get to his lover. The possibility lifted his mood, made him extend a hand to help the poor soul up. The man rolled over and sobbed like a child. Too bad Frankie was in a hurry. He yanked on an arm, dragged and pulled until either common sense or excessive pain brought the guy to his feet. 2 men stepped out of the car like wraiths in the blackness beneath the bridge. Had Frankie not known them, he might have shared the councilman's fear. Tonight, though, they were 2 more guys who had wrecked his night with Sophia, all so they could play gangster games. Frankie's father, Angelo, the boss who had bought the councilman's vote, got out on the passenger side. His longtime friend and enforcer, Gino, closed the driver's door and stood with his arms crossed. Gino had one purpose: to harm those who went against the Renzi family. He'd been doing it for decades and was excellent at his job. He was also a mean, egotistical devil who used far more force than necessary. Frankie had lost respect for him ages ago. Out of the picture, Frankie walked beyond the far end of the bridge. A little more rain didn't matter at that point. He'd rather get soaked than witness Gino at his task. He lost himself in the memory of his last date with Sophia. her dark brown hair thrown over her bare shoulder. She'd sat on his lap and fed him dinner by candlelight. He could almost taste the flavor of beef tips on her breast, almost feel her squirming on his lap while he stroked her bare legs. The vivid memory took him to another place, far away from the storm. A crack of thunder brought him back to the present. A car door's slam announced the end of his father's business. In seconds, Gino picked Frankie up at the end of the bridge. 20 minutes later, he was home in a quiet residential neighborhood off Shady Avenue, a nice part of town without any bridges. He had been gone all day tending to his father's demands, so home felt good. Climbing the steps, grabbing his rain dampened mail from the box felt normal. Once inside the house, the pile of letters and a magazine, folded to fit the confines of the box, flopped open. He saw his own face on the cover of the latest edition of Pittsburgh Buzz, a trendy magazine found most everywhere in town. He had to admit it was a good picture, one that showed off his big brown eyes and a muscular body packed inside a well fitted suit. The thick dark hair had caught the light as an errant lock fell onto his forehead. He wondered if Sophia had seen it. He bet she was using it as a dartboard by now. Pittsburgh Buzz had interviewed Frankie at a recent charity event he'd attended for Angelo. He shook hands with politicians and made deals for Renzi Building, the family's business. His father hadn't done any real work for the company in years. Frankie ran it by himself, for the most part. The less he spoke of it, the more his father forgot about it, which suited Frankie fine. He switched on a lamp and checked the blinds before he stripped. Wet clothes landed in a heap near the door. Angelo's demands and the memory of Gino's fists dissolved in the puddling water at the base of the pile. The air conditioner battled with the hot July night. Cool air hit bare skin, and Frankie shivered. If only a little shake could expel the evening's disaster. Still, he believed the worst was yet to come. He read her text messages from dinner. She asked when he would get to the restaurant. The final one had only a question mark. He let her down tonight, like he'd let her down before, always conceding to his father's demands. The mantel clock's chimes bellowed through the quiet house. They told him it was too late to meet Sophia. He wondered if they announced the end of his relationship, too. He tossed the phone on the bed and trudged toward the bathroom. During a hot shower, he tried to guess what she'd looked like tonight. She would have made herself gorgeous for him. She always did. Her long dark hair would have fallen down her back the way he liked it. The musky scent of the designer perfume he gave her at Christmas would have drawn him in. Sky blue eyes, courtesy of her northern Italian heritage, would have promised future peace, a time when the city's three families would forego hostility in favor of prosperity. With a towel around his waist, he fell onto the bed and grabbed his phone, then read her text messages once more. He'd told her he needed to finish something at work before he could leave the office. It was a lie, of course, one he'd told to spare them both another argument over his father's violence. It would end, it wouldn't end until Frankie became the Renzi boss. She knew this. Phone in hand, he had no idea what to say to her. With a look at the engagement ring he should have given her tonight, he dialed and waited. Pick up, Sophia. Come on, pick up. Chapter 2. Thunder quivered La Tavola's floor to ceiling windows. Sofia Ciambetti looked back at the angry sky with a superior stare. The storm might rage, but it would never outdo the boss's only daughter. Not tonight. Forget it, Queen Bee. It's not going to rain inside, her cousin Maria said. Sophia ended her staring contest with the clouds. A smooth turn on high heels pointed her toward the back corner table where her father sat. Together, they waited for Frankie in the soft candlelight of her trendy downtown restaurant. He said he'd be a little late. Work held him up. Her father, Alfonso Ciambetti, nodded. Not a problem. It is not yet 7:30. The dark clouds make it seem later, but we have time. As though nothing bothered her, Sophia smiled. She watched a server pour the wine she'd chosen 2 days ago, something special to mark the occasion, one she would always remember. Earlier, as she and her employees prepared the meal, she'd told them the reason for the hype. All day long, she labored until the sauce tasted sweeter, the meatballs looked bigger. Everyone bubbled with the owner's anticipation. The clock in the main dining room read 7:45 when Sophia excused herself from the table. She walked into the busy kitchen. Frankie's late, got stuck at work, she said. Oh, her cooks and servers sighed in unison. Their worried faces smiled again as they returned to their duties, except for Maria. Prick, she whispered for Sophia's ears only. Shut it. I'm going to kickbox him across the Roberto Clemente Bridge. Get in line. You really think he's working? No, me neither, Maria said. Your dress is gorgeous, by the way. Love the black straps. Sophia ignored her and dashed into a tiny windowless office at the back of the kitchen. She checked her makeup, then texted Frankie before rejoining her father. You know, Sophia, business of our kind comes up at odd times. Do not chastise Frankie for being late. Of course, Alfonso Ciambetti would take Frankie's side. He was a boss who favored the boss to be over his only daughter. But dinner with you is a special occasion. Ah, Sophia, we have dinner together all the time. But we don't often have dinner with Frankie. Perhaps his presence makes the night remarkable. Alfonso's quizzical look implied he might know the true purpose of their dinner, although she hadn't told him. Frankie believed tradition demanded her father's consent before he made a formal marriage proposal, not after. Eager to have a diamond on her finger, she begged him to reconsider. He refused, regardless of her tantrum. She glanced at the clock. The dining room emptied little by little. Servers watched her as they paraded to and from the kitchen. Their smiles faded as time passed. Let's have the antipasto while we wait, hmm? She said. Of course, he will come, Alfonso said. Don't worry. She sent another text to let Frankie know they were waiting. Servers refilled glasses, the main course arrived, and the clock hands continued to move. It's pouring out there. I hope Frankie is working inside, Alfonso said. Probably, Sophia said with her hostess smile, although she wished otherwise. He deserved to be drenched. She snuck a third text message to him when her father left the table. The dining room emptied, and she sat alone in the candlelight. The clock's tick echoed during a break in the storm. Worried faces peeked through the kitchen window. One at a time, each server and cook had a first-hand look at her. Embarrassed and ashamed, her smile fell when her father returned to his seat. I guess he's not coming, he said. Sophia, he's a busy and important man. I will forgive him this once. Besides, the pleasure of your company is always enough for me. Alfonso's forgiveness dismayed her. To him, it was another fine meal at one of the family's three restaurants, par for the course. To her, it was the pinnacle of life. She felt unworthy compared to the Renzi's firstborn son. Had they been private, she would have screamed at the unfairness, demanded the respect due a Mafia daughter. In public, she waited in silence as Alfonso kissed her cheek, then paid the bill and left an enormous tip. At least she hadn't waited alone. Standing at La Tavola's front door, she watched her father drive away. Dressed in her finest, she remained there until her high heels hurt her feet. The clock read 9 when she marched through the kitchen to her office. She ignored the questions and closed the door on pitiful glances. But the door didn't block out the voices. She still heard the buzz around the kitchen about Frankie and her. Of all the times, all the places, why did he fail her now? Here, where everyone saw her, pitied her. Feeling foolish for her earlier exhilaration, she trapped herself inside the office. She had assumed she would be his fiancée by the day's end. How could she have been so stupid? Frankie was to blame for her disappointment. So why did she feel so ashamed of herself? Shouldn't the shame belong to him alone? Tears ruined her makeup. Her own sobs drowned the noise beyond her door and disrupted her breathing. She had to calm down before she sent him a text. Then she waited and waited some more. You can come out now, Soph, Maria said. Everybody's gone. Sophia opened the door and looked around the deserted kitchen. She didn't need a mirror to know she looked horrid. I don't get it, Maria. He didn't even call. Am I so unimportant to him that he couldn't even call me? She let out a string of swear words as she swept utensils off the stainless steel prep space. Does he think it's okay to stand me up in front of my father, my employees? I don't care if he's the firstborn son of the most powerful family in the city. I think you dodged a bullet here, Maria said. She walked towards Sophia and put a hand on her shoulder. I saw him with someone. That changed everything. Sophia was speechless. She knew that look on her cousin's face. The tilt of her eyebrows said she told the truth. Who? You know who. Marissa Falco. What? When did this happen? Last night. I texted you. I know, and I didn't answer. I was talking to Frankie and forgot to check the message. The conversation paused as Sophia waited for bad news. I went out for a beer with my neighbor, Maria said, picking up utensils from the floor. We went to that new trendy place on the south side. A long black car dropped him off. Marissa held onto his arm while they walked to a table. They stayed for about an hour. When he walked her out, he held both of her hands and kissed her on the cheek. She got in the back seat of the car and he leaned over where she sat. I couldn't see if he kissed her again or not. After a minute or so, he shut the door and the car drove away. Sophia's body went limp. Her mouth hung open. It took a few moments to get her question out. He didn't leave with her? No, he paid the check and left. Did you talk to him? No, he didn't see me. I was in the back of the bar. What was she wearing? Construction clothes? No, she wore a tight black dress. I wonder what she wants, Sophia thought aloud. Her father owns a construction business, though it's not as big as Renzi Building. Frankie broke up with her when you started dating, right? Maria asked. Yes, of course. He hasn't mentioned her since then. Sophia turned away and walked around the kitchen. I had no idea he saw her. How could I not know that? As anger fed her, she spun back to face her cousin. I should be able to sense that kind of deception, right? I don't know, Maria said. In a fit of pique, Sophia smacked the bottom of a hanging skillet. Her emotions ran the gamut from disdain to painful regret. I'll never trust him again. Then you can't marry him. She knew the truth. Still, it was hard to hear words spoken out loud. She paused for a long moment. I know. That's the worst part. An hour later, Sophia sat on her couch in her one bedroom apartment. She looked at a magazine with Frankie's picture on the cover. Her body stirred at the sight. Perfect hair, perfect suit, sparkling smile. His gaze promised sinful delights to the woman who got close enough. She knew all too well what kind of lover he was. The article touted him as Pittsburgh's most eligible bachelor, and eligible he would stay. She wanted nothing to do with him. Still, she fought the tingle between her legs, tried to oust it, but even a workout and a hot shower fell short. Regardless of her arousal, fury continued to fester. Rage steeped inside her. No one was allowed to embarrass her like he had tonight, and no man had ever cheated on her. Not the boss's daughter, the Ciambetti heiress. Never again. She was done with him. And Frankie Renzi could go to hell. Would you like me to stop there?
Wow, that's fantastic. Oh my gosh.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I am adding you to my TBR pile.
Thank
This
you.
is awesome. Oh my
Thank
goodness,
you.
so great. Um, wow, so many questions. Where do you start? So, what was your favorite part about writing this book?
My favorite part?
Yeah.
There were several favorite parts. I put a car chase scene in there in deference to my father. Ever since I was young, he can build a car from the ground up. He has the, car lift in his
Yeah.
garage. It's crazy. But I grew up learning so much about muscle cars and old Cadillacs and things he liked. And all of us, had to know how to work on a car before we were allowed to drive. So that was one of my favorite parts, doing the car chase scene.
What would you say was your most challenging part about writing this book?
Um, Initially, I had trouble with creating Sophia. For some reason, I know how I want the men to be,
Hmm.
but creating the love interest, the female love interest, I found difficult. I'm not sure why, but I wanted her to be successful. So the idea that she owns and operates this restaurant is a lot of fun. And you learn a little later about her, education and things.
So, did you
Um,
find it easier than to write in the voice of the male characters?
I did.
Easier than the female
Mm,
characters?
I did. And I don't know why.
That's wonderful. I find the same thing. I wrote a romance novel that I found it easier to write the men than the women. So
Yeah.
I get it. My
I'm glad.
children's book,
I'm glad
all
you
the
get it.
characters in my children's book are boys. I don't
Yeah.
know why.
Hmm.
Are
Yeah.
you is this book part of a series? Are you planning on writing
Yes.
another in the same world?
Yes, I have. So Frankie's brother, Joey, is a real character in this book. Joey actually originated in the book I wrote, One Step Closer.
Okay.
And he is just an interesting guy who doesn't get along with the father, but he and his brother are so close. And they have another guy who is a tremendous part of the story, Tiny. Tiny is a huge man that grew up with Joey and Frankie just around the corner. So Joey has his own story. I'm through the first draft now, so I'm in sort of
That's
an editing
really
process.
exciting. Oh my gosh, that's
And
so
then,
great. That's so great
yeah,
because this book just came out in February this year.
yeah, hmm,
So you're having essentially twins,
yeah,
right?
hmm.
I mean, your books are being birthed almost back to back.
They're close. Yeah, I should have Joey's out by the end of the year. I'm hoping like around November.
That's
Um,
fantastic.
but it's a fun book. Joey's an
So
interesting character.
have you been now converted to the NaNoWriMo process, or are you not doing it again?
I didn't do it this past year,
Mhm.
but I did it the year before. And the thing I like about it is if I feel I'm not devoting enough time to my writing, I am committed there and I'm watching the tracker every day, how many
Mhm.
words I'm writing, even if it's just a little amount,
It's
you know.
it's a nice little kick in the pants, isn't it? That
It
that
is.
gentle accountability
Right.
every day. Did I put my hands on the keyboard today?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm. And
I'm
yeah,
so glad to have met you. This has been just wonderful. I love your story and I'm really excited to read the rest of it. I, I'm
fun.
I'm so grateful that you looked us up and found us.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for coming. And when your next book comes out, I hope you'll come back and read from that for us as well.
Would love to. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
You too, Diana.